Never worry about errors in your Canvas apps ever again. That almost sounds too good to be true, right? But today I'm going to show you guys how to handle, how to respond, how to have your app respond to any errors that happen within your app and how to deal with them effectively so you don't have to worry about them. So here on the screen, I've got a web page that I created out on powerplatformlinks.com. And I want to talk about the app on air um, property, the on air property of the app object. So I'm going to exit full screen mode and go over to an app that I've created for this session here. And you see here on the left screen, the left side of the screen, we do have an app object and we have a screen one. I'm going to click on the app object and I want to go up to this pull down menu up in the upper left corner. And lo and behold, there is a property here called on air. Now, I just called this a property. And being somebody who's been in software development for a few decades, I'd say over 25 years, is I inside I cringe a little bit when I call something like on air a property, because in object-oriented language, that would be called an event. So whenever an error happens, this code will be invoked or called. Now, what code? There's no code there. That's right. You need to add code in here to handle the errors within your app. So what I just said about events and properties is whenever you see a property that starts with the on prefix, know that that's actually an event. You could put some code in that will respond to that event. So it's very different than all these other properties that you'll find on the app object or on screens. Screen has an on visible and an on hidden. So this is where you can put imperative type of code. Imperative code, and there are some functions in Power Apps that's imperative and some functions that are declarative. Imperative code goes off and does something. That's probably the best way I can describe it. It may not be 100% accurate with my phrasing there, but let's say patch. Patch is an imperative function. It goes off and updates a record. But if we use something like color value, well, that's just going to return a value. It's not going to go off and do anything. It might do a little bit of a calculation in there. So I wanted to talk a little bit about imperative versus declarative because we are in the zone of imperative coding, which I like. Okay, declarative code, like if we go over here to app start screen, because that's declarative, all the code in here is essentially one line of code and will evaluate to a single value that will be returned for this property. Okay, the start screen. Now you could have what looks like many lines of code, but they're probably nested. It's not like do this, semicolon, do this. In fact, in declarative, you don't have semicolons. Where imperative code, you will. Okay, so let's go over here and let's talk about errors. Now, if you want to suppress, now I don't recommend this, but there might be an app that you're creating that's a prototype and you're showing your boss or your client or your project manager, and there's a bug in your prototype application, and you're gonna figure it out. Okay, you're gonna handle it. It's not like you're gonna be moving this to production later in the afternoon or anything. And you want to suppress all errors. You're doing a demo. You could simply put the word false in there. When you have code in the app on air, it's in a way just going to suppress it and not show it to the user or show it on the screen. Okay, let me show you an example of this. If you ever want to, I'll bring that button to the top of the Z order. And look at this on select button that I brought over, it has the word false there. And on select, you see that prefix on, that's imperative code. So if you want something in imperative code that really doesn't do anything, just put the word false in there. It's a Boolean value. Yes, no, true, false. Okay, that's what Boolean means. Um, so yeah, if I were to run this, click this button, and I just had false in there, it's not really going to do anything. But we actually want to do something here. If you ever want to generate an error very easily, all you got to do is divide by 0. That's a big no-no in math, right? But that's what we're going to do to generate an error. So I'm going to say 1 divided by 0. Now, there are differences between bugs and errors, if you didn't know that. So errors, there are 3 types of errors. So let's say I had this button here, and I wanted to display a message to the user. I'm like, oh, I'll do a notify to let the user know what's going on. Something bad happened. But let's say I misspelled notify. Okay. What we're going to get is, I call these red squigglies, or measles. If you have more than one of these red X's on your screen, and call those measles. You hover over it. Notify is an unknown or unsupported function because I misspelled it, right? So that is what's called a syntax error. And syntax errors are great because it's letting you know up front, hey, that's not going to work. Don't try that. You need to change it before you try to publish the app and have the user use it. Okay, so that's the first type of what people refer to as errors. Now, the whole topic of this video is never worry about errors again, um, which brings in the second type of error. And let's say I took this out and I wanted to divide by 0 there. Now, I don't get any syntax errors. What does syntax means? What does syntax mean? It means the rules of language. So if you speak English like I do, there is a syntax. There are rules that govern the English language, just like you have rules that govern the Power FX language. And you'll hear that a lot with coding languages, like, oh, that's a syntax error, which means it's not going to run. It doesn't conform to what the language is expecting. So here, the second type of error is what's called a runtime error. And that's the type of error that I'm referring to when I decided on the topic this morning. Okay, so these are the errors that your user sees. Okay, and the third type of an error, sometimes they're called errors, but the more appropriate name for the third type is a bug. So it's not a syntax error. The users aren't getting errors, but the application isn't functioning the way it should. Let's say I had 10 divided by 5. I'm expecting 2, and it gave me 3 instead. No error, but it was a bug. Okay. Now, some programmers don't call those bugs, they call them features. Features are what those are called. I'm kidding. Don't say that. Okay. So let's see what happens when we run this and we make an error happen within our application. So I'm going to click on that and nothing happened. I don't see any red X or anything. That's because over here in App.OnError, we have the word false. So let's take that out and let's try this again. Divide by 0. Oh, look at that. Invalid operation. Division by 0. Okay. Now, something you could do that you might think of. So yeah, we get the red X here because the error wasn't handled. Okay. So we could go over here and say notify. We can say stay calm. An error just happened though. And you probably want the notify function does have an enumerated value called notification type, as you can see on this little pop-up information. And look at this, we have error. So that's going to make a sort of like what we just saw a moment ago. Okay, it's got a message is going to be up here at the top of the screen, and it's going to be pink with the background. Information, I believe, is a light gray. Success is green, and a warning. I think the warning might actually be gray, but I don't remember there. So I'm going to pick error because that's what happened. And then the third parameter, the second and third parameters of notified. You see this one of two. So it's showing me in object-oriented terms, these are called overloaded functions. So whoever created the PowerFX language, there's actually two versions of notify. One that will just use, I guess these two parameters, and then the second one handles three parameters. Just a little bit of information there for you. The third parameter is the amount of milliseconds that you'd like that message to be displayed at the top of the screen. Now, as a user, somebody that works with Power Apps, you're probably thinking, well, I don't like it to appear there for long, because you've probably been annoyed by these little notifications. You're like, I don't want it to appear longer than a second. So you might say 1,000 milliseconds. But think about the user, okay? The user may not see the error right away. They typically do, and they typically let you know about them, which is a good thing. However, you want to give them enough time to see it, process it, and realize that they don't know what to do, or that they should let you know, or perhaps that they should take a screenshot, and that might take them a few seconds. So in this case, I would say 10,000 milliseconds or 10 seconds. Leave it up there for a while. And whenever hey, there was an error that happened. It's so funny when users tell you that there's an error, and you say, okay, can you see me a screenshot? What exactly did it say? And they'll paraphrase, or like, oh, I don't know. And that would actually help you resolve the error, right? But so that's why I would say 10 seconds. Okay. Now, this code is in the App.OnError. Okay. So now we do have a red squiggly. Now, it's not a syntax error, but it is showing us the second type of error, which is a runtime error. I'm going to run this again and click on the button again. Okay. Stay calm. An error just happened, though. Notice that it didn't give us the normal error message. Yeah. Something I do want to do is keep up on the chat messages. We are live here. Dustin says you forgot to include user error. Well, that's true. I'll chalk that up along with my hey, that's a feature joke. When the error is caused by the loose nut behind the wheel. Yeah. Data's king. This is a great tip. I'll use these errors to notify. Guys, you are in for a treat. Okay, so kudos to those of you who have lasted to the 14-minute mark. Guys, I'm gonna blow your mind with some really cool stuff. So if you made it this far, I haven't even scratched the surface on what I'm about to show you. Okay, this is gonna be a big deal, and you could use it in all your apps. And like I said in the thumbnail and the title, never worry about errors again. All right, so I just wanted to cover all my bases and lay a good foundation before I go into advanced type of things that I would do for my own applications regarding errors. Okay. So I just want to let you know, if you put code in here, this code is going to run instead of Power Apps letting the user know that something bad happened. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to comment this out for now. And I can make this MS App file available to you guys and upload it to my GitHub repository that I call my code snippets. So if I get out of full screen mode, and you head over to github.com/PowerAppsDarren. Okay, here is the link right here, github.com PowerAppsDarren. And you're going to get to my repository, which is called Power Apps or Power FX Snippets. I thought that was very appropriate. Okay, and you see I've got a little App.OnError folder here. So I've got all kinds of goodies to share with you guys. Okay, so very good. Max says, nice. If I don't share the app with anyone else, I can use it the way it was intended and not get errors. That's true. Yeah. Yeah. If you just wanted to put false in there. Yeah. I think the place that I would use that is if I was demoing the app. And I didn't want any errors to happen, even if they did. Okay. So now that I've mentioned my code snippet here, I'm going to go full screen. And first of all, I do already have an MS app file out here. If you want to download and upload it, it's got pretty much everything that I'm going to add to that Canvas app. I might upload the one I'm currently working on and make it version 2 or something, or put the date on it. So I have some images which I use in the README here. Okay, and essentially the directions that I'm giving in the README. So you see, there's a README.markdown file that you can read here. Let me see if my backspace key works for going back. Nope, that typically works in browsers, or at least it used to. Okay, all right. So let's actually, yeah, I'll actually go through this page here. So you see there's a file here, fx App.OnError.yaml. Okay, so we have this file. Now, I included everything from my app object. I cracked open my MS app file, looked at the code, and I brought this over because it's a pure YAML file. But if I go over to this one, I just have the on air because I don't want to confuse anybody, because what I had with this file here is people would just copy the whole thing and try to paste it over in their app on air. And that's not going to work for a good reason here. Because it's got all this other stuff. Okay, so what you want to do is, again, this is a YAML file. So this is the on-air property or event. And you see a little equal sign on the next line. You want to start there and start dragging all this code. And there's quite a bit of code. Okay, and I'm trying to get it to scroll down, and I'm not able to do that. Let's see if I can go to the very bottom. And see, there's the on start, there's the theme, there's the host object. I don't want any of that. I want to start here. And I've got a key combination to share with you guys. This is one of my pro tips. People pay big money for this. I want to hit Control, Shift, and I'm going to hit the home key on the keyboard. You may have never used the home key, but it's above your arrow keys on your keyboard. And I'm going to get all this code. Okay, so see what I have selected here. Right after that equal sign, and I go all the way down. Now I'm going to explain all this code in a moment once I get it into Power Apps. And I don't get all this stuff at the bottom. I'm going to right click and I'm going to copy. I'm going to exit full screen mode, then go back in. All right, I'm going to go into the app. Here's our on air. I don't want to mess with what I had here, so I'll just make a little vertical line with code and a code comment. And I'll go here to the top and I will paste the code. Now, first thing that you might notice is we have what's called a syntax error. Yeah, and we're going to resolve that, okay? And something else you'll notice, since we're talking about errors, this is so appropriate, guys. You see this scroll bar here on the side of the screen? I wish we had line numbers. Microsoft, if you're listening, please give us line numbers here. That would be very nice. Any decent code editor is going to have some line numbers. But you notice that there's a little red streak going down my scroll bar here. It's showing you that there's an error within this block of code. Isn't that so nice that they would help us out with that? All right. So I think that's a great feature there that they've given us. Now I do have lots of good emojis here to sort of make this block of code more readable. Okay. I've also included a lot of good Microsoft documentation if you want to understand a lot of the concepts and the functions that we have available to us in Canvas Power Apps. Okay. So if I identified these are probably the 3 best links, at least that I found when I did this. And I have a step-by-step guide built in. There's actually more comments in this code than there is actual code. And that's a good thing. Okay. So step by step, please follow the instructions to finalize the installation of this useful snippet of code to your Power Apps application. Look at this. Please be sure to add the Office 365 Outlook connector. Now, why would I instruct people to do that? Because what this code does is going to email us whenever a user or you experiences an error within an application. Isn't that nice? So if you want it to email you, we need a connector that will perform this email operation. Okay, so this is what we're looking for. Office 365 Outlook. Notice it doesn't say Microsoft or M365. It's Office, which was before the M365 thing came out. All right, so I'm gonna, this is sort of funny. We're going over to data, and Outlook really isn't data. It's a connector. So they sort of group all these 1,000+ connectors in with data, which is fine. And I'm going to search for what I just copied on my clipboard, which is this Office 365 Outlook, and it's not showing up. Okay. So that was a little disappointing here, maybe because it has spaces in the name. So if I put a space there and there, look, that pops up. Okay, so I'm going to select that, and I'm going to click on that. And so that's me authenticated within this tenant. Okay, so I've satisfied this requirement. Now, did you guys notice anything on the screen? There's now no red squigglies. There's no syntax errors here anymore. So that's what we needed to have in there, first of all. Okay. And Dustin says, and line numbers in the error message. Yeah, absolutely. And you can actually get at that, believe it or not, using the error information that you can retrieve from these functions, thankfully. Okay. And Kendall says, DAX and Power BI also needs line numbers and format text. Oh boy. Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to go down step by step and sort of step you through this, this block of code that is probably going to really change how errors are handled in your applications from here on out. Okay, so variable number 1, we have a variable that we create called fx error handler email. Okay, so initially I put my email address out there and I published it to GitHub, and then I started getting hundreds upon hundreds of emails into my email box, which I immediately regretted because nobody was coming in here and replacing my email address with their own. So until you handle this, whoever is experiencing or running the application when the error happens, they're getting emailed. Okay. So what I'd recommend is that you just put your email address in there, and you might want to take out the user because you may not want the user to know. This is what I like to have happen, guys, is when a user picks up the phone, and these days they don't pick up a phone, they just send an email. Hopefully it's not a nasty email. They'll send you an email, hey, a bug happened, or they'll bring it up or they'll send you a Teams message, or wait till there's a meeting and mention the defect that's in your application. I find that QA people use the word defect, which it sort of hurts my feelings a little bit when people tell me that there's a defect. There's been a defect found in my application. Probably because they're used to people like us saying, well, that's a feature. So they use defect. Okay. So what I point out here, change the email address below to your email address. Copy the code over to app formulas. Well, isn't that something? So instead of having a global variable, we could just put this over in app formulas. Now, guys, I've released 2 structured, highly edited videos just this week on this channel, on this YouTube channel, talking about app formulas. So if you follow my channel, you like my content, chances are, hopefully, you've seen both of those videos. If you haven't, be sure to check those out. I think they're very useful and informative because they just gave us a new feature just last week called user-defined types. So we talk about that. All right. So step 2 is to copy this code over to app formula. So I'm going to copy that code. And if I go over to the tree view, I already have app selected. So now I'm going to go over to formulas, and there's nothing here. Okay. Just going to paste that. I do like to sort of indent my code in here. And I might say something like Darren at superpowerlabs.co. It's not com, it's just co. Now it's giving me a red squiggly here, which is a syntax error. I'll hover over it. Can't create it because that name is already used for a variable. That's interesting. Well, if we go back to our App.OnError, we can now take out that line of code, and then we're going to be fine. Okay. In my mind, if you've got a value that doesn't change in your application, like this, don't use a global variable. I'll try to avoid global variables, not at all costs, but by default, unless I have a good reason to use a global variable, I just don't. I either use local variables with blocked variables, or I create named formulas. And what we just did in app formulas was we created a named formula. Yeah. Sometimes they're called named expressions, but I think named formulas is the one that's used mostly. Okay, and this thing right here just had some word wrap going on there, so that's handled. Okay, in fact, if I go back over to app formulas, there's our line of code, and now there's no syntax error. Okay, so we've got that. Good deal. We'll go back to on error, and let's go to step 2. Now, did we do all this? Yeah, we copied that. Delete or comment out. Okay, so I finished that one. Now we're going to go down to variable number 2. And I'm going to keep up with the live comments here. I wish there was a way to automatically screenshot the user's computer when the error happens and it sends the screenshot as an attachment to yourself. Well, wouldn't that be interesting, huh? Well, think about this, Kendall, is that we do have that PDF function. It is still set up, I believe, as an experimental. So let's just type in PDF here. Look at this. Allows you to create PDF documents from screens, galleries, and containers. Now, it may not capture that notify, but you could display the error on the screen somewhere besides that notify function. So you could use a PDF function, and you could use that PDF function, capture that, and then email it out. I mean, if you really wanted something like that. And Dustin brings up a good consideration here for privacy reasons. Yeah. And I'm trying to think, well, these are people in your organization. you know. However, if you think about it, Sally over in HR that runs payroll, she might be paying your coworker who makes twice as much as you, and you're the developer of the app. And it takes a screenshot of her screen, and you see some things that the people over in HR don't want you to know about. So maybe I think Dustin has a point there. That probably wouldn't be a best practice. And I don't want to give anybody any bad ideas. So anyway, I'll continue on here. The application name. Okay, so we're gonna do the same thing. Look, the name of the application. So once you start using this, you're really gonna enjoy it. Hopefully, you'll come to rely on this code, and you probably put it in all your applications. I put it in all my applications. I put it on all my templates that I use, like my Jumpstart kit. Okay. Um, and you'll get errors, and you're like, okay, what application out of the 15 apps that I've done, which one is that from? Yeah. So you'll want to put this in here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm not going to copy this line of code. I'm going to copy the line of code that this guy Darren gave me here in the comments. I'm going to go over to app formulas. And for some reason, it keeps scrolling me down. That's weird. All right, I'm going to paste that there, and it's going to give me that syntax error again. Now the name of my app is all errors. So I'm actually going to say the all errors application. Okay. I'm going to save that. Now I'm going to go back over to App.OnError, and I'm going to go down to step number 2, and I'm going to comment that out. So what I just did over in app formulas is going to work now. So delete or comment out. Okay, I did that. Step 3. What about the application URL? Now, what is the application URL? If you want to send a link to a user, let's say we shared it with somebody. Okay, I'm going to show you what I'm talking about here. There's a little share button up here beside your play. Okay, they've changed this screen. Okay, you can set somebody up as a co-owner if you want, and it sends a link off to them. Okay, now I don't like to send them emails. You know why? I used to do that. I'm like, yeah, I'll give you access, and yeah, send them an email, let them know that they have access. They would get a message because the cybersecurity teams and medium to large size companies, they're going to be on top of things, and they're going to have every email that comes in your email box, if it originates from somebody outside your organization, like Microsoft. Microsoft would be an external organization, right? Those emails come from Microsoft, and they'll get this message: warning, this could be a malicious email, because it didn't originate from somebody inside your organization. And they would send off those emails or call up the service desk department and say, hey, this guy Darren tried to share an app with me, but I think it might be a phishing email. And when I say phishing, I'm talking about PHISH. So if you want to know about that, do a Google search on that. So I don't do that anymore. I just send them the link. Okay. Now, once you get this link, let's see what this thing looks like. Okay. I'm going to paste it. Oh, look at that. That is the link to this particular application. And these long strings, these are GUIDs. Okay. So E stands for environment. So these are parameters being passed into apps.powerapps.com/play. Okay. So this is the environment. And so if you share 20 different apps within this environment, this portion of the link will be the same. Now, A is for application. So this is the GUID. That's the unique identifier for this particular application. Now, what is all this other stuff? Okay, there's the tenant ID. And we also have source time. What is source time? I'm imagining that's a date timestamp based on, I don't know, when the app was last published, perhaps. That would probably be something good to use there. Okay. So I give people two options. If you like to link to play it as a user would, now I'll show you how we used to get to this, just in case anybody wants to know how to do this. I'm going to go back into that environment, and I'm going to find this app. Hopefully it appears at the top, which it just did. You see it says on errors there. And I'm going to go in here and just go to details. Okay, go to details. There is the link. And you could click on this link here. You could use this QR code. There's your app ID. There's all kinds of useful information, including all the stuff here in the tabs at the top, like the versions. Okay, so that's another way of getting at the link. Yeah. Now I do see Dustin says, click the ellipses to switch to the old layout. Really? Yeah, I don't know. Okay, if I go here, okay, look at that. There's the, thank you, Dustin. That was very useful. I like that. And that will bring up a screen that looks like, ooh, let's just click on this. Yeah, this is the old way. And you see there's a little checkbox down there. I always uncheck that now. And if you get to this screen, you just click on that X and you'll find that link right there. So thanks for sharing that. Yeah. Fantastic. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to send off an email that's going to come to us, the developer. Okay. And so I'd probably use that. Now, if you'd like to link back here to the Power Apps Studio to easily edit the app. So if it's just you, you might want to use the link that's up here in your address bar. Okay. You get that link, and that might be more useful for your purposes because you're receiving these emails. And let's say months have gone by. Which app is that? And you click on that link, and it's just going to open it like a user would run it or play it. Okay. And that's not really what we want to have happen. So if you want the stuff to, just copy this link. Boom, got it. Look at this. Pick one of the two, copy the code. Oh, look at this. Now I have a feature in Windows. I can copy multiple things to my clipboard. Okay, now did I copy this? I'll copy that again. I'm going to go over to app formulas, like the directions just told me to. Now I know why it keeps scrolling down like that. It's so weird. I'm going to paste that. That is my link. Now I also had other things. So I'm going to hit, instead of Control V for Victor, I'm going to hit Windows V for Victor. And there is my named formula that I want. And I am going to take this out. I'm going to put a double quote at the end. Okay. And to separate each of these name formulas, we need to have a semicolon there. Okay. So you could have a vertical space between all these. Now, what is it complaining about now? Because it looks like, again, we have a syntax error, and that's because we still have it over in the other place. Okay. So I'm going to go over to App.OnError, and I'm going to scroll down to where I was at. Okay. Now we don't need this. So did you guys know that you can drag code around? I'm going to drag that right there. Okay. So now that's gone. All right. So we're making tons of progress. Now there's only 5 steps here. So we're almost done with going through all this, guys. Okay. Now I like this light color gray, and this is going to help when we format the email, which we use HTML for. Okay. So you see, boom, here's an HTML document. There's the body. So we're going to be using this light gray color. And that's why it's there. Okay. Feel free to change the color if you want, but I like it. I'm going to copy this code right here. I'm going to go over to App Formulas, paste it right there. And we're going to ignore this error for a second because what we need to do now on step 4 is simply comment this line of code out, and we're going to be just fine. Now, there's a variable 5, and this is a collection variable. Okay. Now, let's look at the documentation that I typed up. It's a collection variable that will hold all the errors that have occurred in the session for the user. Okay, hopefully everybody understands what a session is. A user goes to your application. Maybe they go to 50 different screens, or they go to, they're doing a lot of things in your app, and they could be in there for an hour. That's all one session. But let's say they hit refresh on the browser, then that would be a new session. Or they go off to lunch and they come back and have to go back in to new browser window or whatever. That would be a separate session. Okay. Also keep in mind your variables are going to appear over here. We've got this new thing over here. It's been out there maybe for a few months. And you got all your global variables. Look at this. I love this. We have no global variables. I love that. I think people overuse global variables and it just becomes a big hot mess. And you forget what's in there, what it's used for. Sometimes people misspell it. Sometimes I could go into that and probably talk about it for 20, 30 minutes, so I won't. Look at this, our name formulas. This is great to see here. Okay. Context variables. We're not using context variables yet. Okay. Component variables. And then we have collections. So there's our app errors collection. Okay. So that's what it's used for. And down here, you'll see that it is created on line 55 here. If I had the line number, it might be 55. It might be more. All right. No changes are needed for this collection variable unless you like to store these in a data source. Oh, look at that. A data source like a SharePoint list or a Dataverse database table. Okay. That is probably a great idea. If you'd like to implement this, number 1, create a database table or SharePoint list. You may call it whatever makes sense to you. But a good name for this would be Power Apps Errors. So you might want to do something like that. Create 9 fields that are single line of text, string, or in varchar. Yeah, if you're using SQL Server, SQL Server's a little fancy. You got to use fancy terminology like in varchar. Don't use text in SQL Server because that is unlimited amount of text, which you don't want to use. There's some limitations that come along with that. Okay. So these are all the fields that we use in this collection. Okay. So that's the schema. Okay. That's the information that we're going to have in that collection. And if you want to have a database table that captures all this stuff, then go ahead and create it. Even the date timestamp, it could be a string. You can format it however you want. So that might be the only one that you might want to set up as a date time. Okay, I'll leave that up to you. I'm going to keep scrolling here. Add this data source to the project at the bottom of this whole code block. Patch your data source with the contents of the collection. And we got the code here. Now, if I hit Control End on my keyboard, look at this, the end of the app. Okay, well, here it is. There's the code. Now, notice we still have this collection. We're going to patch the data source, if you went off and created it, with all the contents of the collection. Okay, and then you want to clear that collection, because that thing, if you don't clear it, it's going to keep a running list of every single error that's happened. And every time an error occurs, it's going to, let's say they've had 2 or 3 errors that have happened, and then a 4th one comes in. Every time you're going to be patching all 4 of those every time as the 5th, 6th, 7th come in. Okay, so you'd actually want to clear that. So I made it very easy for you to implement that feature if you want it. Okay. And boom, the rest of this code may remain unmodified. And that's it. Okay. Well, let's just run this and see what happens. I'm going to click on this button that divides by 0. I see some champagne bubbles that started to go across the screen, and looks like they're fine now. So, yeah. Okay, it's telling me the data source, so that connector that we added to send emails was added. That's very good. Now, I'm going to open up one of these browser windows and actually pull up my email, because that should have been emailed to me. Let's see here. So my video froze up. That is a weird looking face that I have. Okay, I'm going to turn that off for a second. And I'm going to try to change my webcam really quick. Oh, look at this. I found the email. So while I'm messing around with my video camera, I bring this over so you guys can see this. Look at that. Okay, I'm going to bring that back to the right video source, and hopefully it works now. Here we go. Okay, so you see it's nice gray. So that was that color that we defined. But look at what we did. Errors occurred in the all errors application. So just in case you don't put the name application in your application, well, what what did I call it over here in app formulas? Okay, so I mean, putting the word application in your application name is probably a little redundant, so that should probably be taken out anyway. So no worries there. So we're sending an email to ourselves, and what we have is, and it tells us the user that experienced the error. Here's the date timestamp. It tells us what screen the error happened on. The source was this button that I didn't rename. I probably should have renamed that. Invalid operation, and the observed. Now, not always will you get an HTTP response or status code, but I include it because sometimes those are included, perhaps that the operation involved an HTTP request. Okay. And look at this. I've got a link back to the app. So that's a very useful email, I would say. That's what I would want to see in something like this. Okay. Now let's go back into App.OnError. And let's look at the rest of the code that is working great. Okay. The rest of this code may remain unmodified. I say may because you can modify it all you want. Okay. So we're sending out an email. So I create some with block variables. So we have a subject line for our email. How many errors did we get? There's our color. Now I formatted this color. I use that FX light gray color. And what I created here was cascading style sheet CSS type of inline style. Okay, and put that into a string variable. There's the screen name. We access the app.activescreen.name. And this is the user that experienced the error. Okay, so now we have everything that we need to do to go ahead and process this error. Now, there is a collection that is built into Power Apps for a situation. If you find yourself in the App.OnError, if you're working with errors, you can access this collection. And what I'm doing, because this collection doesn't have everything in the format that I wanted, okay, now I gave it an alias, as my. So every time you see my, we're talking about a single record out of that collection. So we have the message, the source, the observed. Okay, so we got some information, but I want to include a timestamp in there, screen name. Okay, so that's why I sort of extended that, created my own. So I take all of that information from that collection in the format that I wanted it, and I put it in this collection. Now we don't need anything from there, so I clear it out. Why do we want to clear it out? Because we don't want to see, let's say the second error happens. I don't want to see that first error being duplicated every time an error happens, which is what would have happened if we didn't clear this out. Now, this line of code, Office 365 Outlook, we're using that to send an email, and we use the latest version of this. So if you're trying to send an email, you've got that version, and so you always want to use the latest version. When you do that, sometimes it duplicates the name of the connector for some reason, which is slightly annoying. So we're using our variables here. Now we got some HTML. Now, if you understand HTML, you might want to go in here and change it however you want, or you might want to learn some HTML. And it's not complicated HTML, but this is what makes up the email. So I use a concat function, which takes a collection or a list, and it will smush everything together as a string. Okay. And that's what we want in that case. This is sort of like a loop. We're looping through all those errors and making them single rows within this HTML table. Okay. And then at the bottom, we go, hey, this is the application URL, a link to it, and there's the application name. So as you can see, everything's nice and dynamic. And boom, here we're at the end. Guys, that's it. Okay, that's it. So what happens if I were to click on this a second and a third time and a fourth time? Well, we should probably be getting emails throughout all this. If you want to, this is sort of an interesting thing here. So we do have a good table control within the modern controls that is so much better than the classic data table that we've had for years, and it's still in preview. Like, what? This one is so much better. Okay. And what I'm going to use as a data source, as you could guess here, let me move that button over a little bit, and then I'll line this thing up with it. Okay. The data source is going to be our COL. Now, this is something I don't like. Microsoft asks us in the standard guidelines for coding for Power Apps, you start all your collection names with the COL, right? And you do that, and you expect to see all of your collection names here. So we got column names, and we've got this big enumerated value. Where are all my collections at? That's sort of annoying, isn't it? So it's going to force me to go over here and look at the name COL app errors. See, I'm not getting any IntelliSense. So Microsoft, if you're watching, please resolve that. All right, so we've got the COL app errors. I need an S there, and now it's fine. As you can see, we have 4 rows there. Okay. Now, a lot of times with these modern controls where you have a control that lists out records, what you need to do is go over here to the fields and let it know what fields you want to be viewed in this. The screen, the source, this time, pretty much everything, right? Okay, and because we're not really seeing anything for these two, I'm just going to remove them for now. But they'll be in the emails. Okay, here we go. We can look at the errors that happened. Okay. And you could choose to actually show this to the user if you want. What I like to have happen, I came up with this idea years ago when I was working as an ASP.NET developer, and we did a lot of work for Fortune 500 corporations in the United States. And the uh, the web team, the guys that did ASP.NET applications for our clients, um, they would have bugs. And in fact, we'd have these meetings with the clients, and they would be demoing the application, and errors would pop up. And I kid you not, the developer, I came to this and started seeing all this stuff happening. The developer was like, "Okay, I'll go take care of that." He stood up in the conference room, and nobody had laptops. He would go off to his cube and fix the error, and he may or may not come back to the meeting. So what I did was I put in all my applications a global catch, like what we did here. And I would send myself an email. And by the time, let's say a big company like State Farm would call us like, "Hey, there's an error in your application." It's like, "Yeah, I know, it's already fixed. Just go ahead and refresh it." And they noticed whenever the apps that Darren did, the errors were taken care of even before these meetings were happening. And so I was given a raise, and then I was like, "Hey, we want you to implement this for all the other guys' applications." So I researched it and found out, like, well, if you let me in that server room, or let me let me get to this server in some way, or remote desktop into it. And they literally took me to the server room, and I had to configure IIS, which is Microsoft's web server, to actually set that up so it actually used my ASPX error page to capture all the errors, throw them into a database, and email the appropriate developer. And then my fellow developer started getting upset. "Your app is spamming me." And I'm like, "Fix your errors." So anyway, all right, so let's take a look at this. Pretty much all this that we've done here, if you go back over here, again, there is an MS app file that you can download and use right now. You can open it up and copy the paste around, or you could just go to this YAML code and copy the code. Okay. So, guys, I do want to let you guys know here in, I think it's here in the next week. So the 18th, I'm holding a boot camp, a 5-day course. You should see a link in the video description below if you'd like to enroll in that. It was very popular the first time that we did it, so we're going to hold it again here in the month of November. There is a pretty significant early bird discount. You might want to take a look at that. And let's say beyond that, I just have this one request for you guys.
Out of this, a comment or even a like really helps the channel and lets people like you know this is good content. Much appreciated.
All right. So the burning question that should be in your mind is,
So you're going to like this video next. Let's see if they're right. Or you can select this playlist, which I've selected for you based on the content you're currently watching. Guys, gotta hurry, click one of them. Otherwise, YouTube's going to autoplay some other video, which you probably don't want.